Okay, it's a segment 2. I'm with John Jeckovich. It's July 4th, 2024, and we're talking to John Jeckovich how he remembers the circus coming to town with the large elephants and the recollection of some 4th of July parades that he watched in Niagara Falls, New York. And now we're speaking with Mr. Jeckovich about his paper route. Go ahead and tell us about your paper route.
The paper route?
Yeah, tell us about it.
I had 150 papers, Jeckovich, not American paper, it was Polish paper.
So everything was in Polish?
Yeah, it was a Polish paper. I went from Portage Road near Ayers Whitmer Lumber all the way to Fort Veterinary Hospital in Hyde Park.
Was it 7 days a week?
7 days a week. I had a black night bicycle with a horn on the side. I love that bike.
Everyone would love a black knight today. That's unbelievably classic bike. The light on the front, the horn, battery operated horn on the side.
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable.
Wow.
That type of bike today is really collectible. Did your newspaper customers pay you well?
No, sometimes usually Polacks didn't pay.
What happened now?
I paid you last week. I said, no, you didn't pay me last week.
So what did you have to do about it?
I just keep going back and they broke down.
So they're always trying to
get it. Well, you're talking 30, 35. That was the Depression era. These guys that have work in the factories or nothing.
But many of them said that they paid when they actually didn't.
No, they paid when you go back 4 or 5 times.
What do they normally say when you went the first time?
What do they say first?
You knock on the door and say, "Hey, I want my $1.50 for the week." What do they say?
I don't have the money, so I'm the door in their face.
Did they also say that they paid?
Who?
Did they also say that they paid you before?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I had it in the book.
Uh-huh. So, if your customers didn't pay you, did you have to pay the newspaper out of your pocket?
Well, I had to pay the paper every week. I say $150 to buy the papers. I had to give them. I got the papers Thursday, and Saturday I had to pay them.
Yeah. Did your mother or father help you with the paper route?
No.
Does your 2 brothers help you with the paper route?
No. Well, no. Stevie had the paper route. He couldn't do it. Look, he never bothered with it.
Why couldn't Stevie do it?
He's too busy.
Uh-huh. Well, that was still good experience for you.
Right.
As a young boy, that was still a good experience. I wonder what year they stopped delivering the Polish newspaper to that neighborhood.
Janet Lasinski?
Yeah. I wonder, where was it printed at? Do you remember?
It's printed someplace in Buffalo.
Okay.
It's a Polak neighborhood.
Uh-huh. So it had customers in Buffalo and Niagara Falls.
Yeah, and Kenmore and Tonawondas, and then even up in down at the out the river there.
So that Polish newspaper was a big operation.
Yeah, 150 papers a day.
Oh. Did your mother read it?
She read it, yeah, Polish paper. She looked at the obituary all the time.
She was looking at what?
Obituary.
She's reading the obituaries.
Yeah.
I'll be damned.
Yeah, 1930s.
Well, I'll start reading your book unless you want to read it.
No, go ahead.
You don't want to read it? Want me to read it?
No, go ahead.
All right. Before I start, what is your dog tag number?
421-2965.
All right. That's the password. Here we go. Chapter 6, page 134, Home on Furlough, Farewell to Anne. I felt that I presented a dismal, eerie picture regarding my family, and I attempted to change the subject. Anne would not hear of it and prodded me on it in pursuit of an explanation for the statements I just had made. My face became warm as the blood raced to it, for I never talked about with such intensity with anyone about my family. I blurted out that my mother was cantankerous and in many ways very difficult person to get to know. But I injected, once she got over her rough exterior, she was the kindest, warmest person imaginable. She would do anything for you providing it was for her own good. But there was always in her personality that filtered out much of her relationship with other people. Anyone then said something that jolted and shocked me. Oh, she must be just like you. I'm sure I would get to love her. She explained quite calmly. I looked at her in amazement, wondering how she could have said that. Knowing that she had startled me, she put her arms around me and gently kissed me. Her warm lips somewhat and embraced me. I hope that this will be the end of this conversation. She said it was getting late and that we better get me settled down for the night. As we drove back to Weatherbury's, neither of us said much. The first time I felt awkward sitting next to Ann while she drove. I thought that I should be driving. Where was my masculinity? All of a sudden, I felt inferior in Ann's eyes, and she had finally seen my true self, that I was really weak and uncertain. We entered the room, and Ann walked over to the couch and sat down. I followed her and stretched out, putting my head in her lap. I closed my eyes as she ran her fingers through my hair. I thought I had really messed things up, talking about my mother in such a negative fashion. She finally asked me what I was thinking about, as either one of us had said anything since we sat down. I lay there with my eyes closed, giving over in my mind what I had said, at the same time contemplating Ann's reaction to all was said. I truly believe that she had second thoughts regarding me and was trying to let me down easy as she made her exit from my life. I finally spoke out. The only really important consideration should be the two of us and nothing else. We shouldn't worry about anything else. I know, having been down the path on numerous occasions, what matters is us. The more we think about other people's feelings, the more convoluted it becomes for us. And before we know it, our entire relationship has been completely compromised. Ann said nothing but continued running her fingers through my hair. I closed my eyes once again and lay there, my head on her lap. She then quietly said, I think we should get married. I sat up and with a jerk and looked at her. She was perfectly serious and said, well, isn't that what you've been leading up to all evening? I thought for a moment and came to realization that she was correct. She was uncanny in her perception of my thoughts. I asked her, minutes?
21.
Okay. I asked her what she thought, and she quickly replied that she had come to the conclusion weeks ago. I lay back on her lap and felt relaxed. The sense of tranquility and serenity overcame me as it swallowed me up with a burst of energy and love. I would long remember the feeling and would not experience the same sensation again for many, many years. The moment I jumped up, stood in front of her and explained, let's go, let's get married. She looked at me and said, don't be foolish. I completely mystified and told her I thought we were going to get married. She said yes, but not now. I walked to the window and looked out at the darkened street below. Ann came behind me, put her arms around my waist, gently kissed me on the neck. You're not ready for marriage. She walked to the door and left the room. I heard the car start up, and I could see the red glow of the car lights as she left the parking lot. What a night this has been. What a night this has been. I thought, and then suddenly it came to me, perhaps this was Ann's way of saying goodbye. Goodbye forever. A feeling of despair came over me once again, and I thought what I really wanted was in reality not mine to attain. And when Ann did not call to tell me that she arrived home safely, this only confirmed my wildest fear all the more. It was over. I had botched it again. I lay in bed devastated, trying to think of what I should do next. Should I go back to camp early? That did not appeal to me. Should I go to Evansville? That's worse yet. Or should I stay here? The thought of my first trip here alone before I met Ann was disdainful. I did not know what to do. Perhaps I should have stayed at home my entire furlough. That did not appeal to me either. I was like a rudderless ship drifting helplessly and powerlessly in a violent storm. I felt completely lost. It was then I came to full realization of how much I depended on Ann for my well-being and purpose in life. Without her...
Richard up there? Richard?
No, I don't see him up here.
Is Richard there?
No.
No?
Who's he looking for?
Rich. I'll go see what she wants.
Without her, all meaning escaped, and its place was an ever-widening depression, growing even wider, with no chance of returning to life, which she made for me.
Well, this lady down here, she said she can't remember being.
And it was utterly desolated. It was soon my exhaustion had come for me that finally fell asleep in some respite from my torment and misery. I awoke several times during the night, and it took me several moments to rediscover my plight, only to feel worse each time I awoke. I was up early the next morning. Sleep has not refreshed me, and I felt as if I'd been up all night. Perhaps I thought a cold shower would revive me, but it was not to no avail. I could not shed the feeling of despair. It overcame me, my whole self, as if it were a thick fog engulfing my entire little world. As I dressed, I tried to think straight and formulate some sort of plan. What was I going to do? Then what was I going to do? I suddenly thought of Smith and his drinking, and I knew why he drank. It was to give himself some kind of relief from his frustrations. I thought that is what I'll do. Get drunk and forget everything. Then wake up and maybe things will look different. But in my muddled and perplexed mind, I could not perceive the approach as not working. I would only be worse. That left me no alternative. I was bewildered. I did not know which way to turn, which direction I should take, and where to go. I completely lost touch with reality. Suddenly I thought I was back to some semblance of reality, and there was a knock on the door. I quickly reached for my trousers, and in my bare feet, I opened the door. Ann was standing there smiling. She looked radiant. I threw my arms around her and held her tightly, not saying anything. After a moment, I blurted out that I had just lost her, and I thought I had just lost her and that she was not coming back. I then tried to explain to her the feelings of dejection and the miserable desolation I had ever since she had left last night. As we walked into the room and closed the door, I embraced her and began kissing her.
What? What's the
I
matter?
don't know what's going on.
Huh?
They can't find Rich. Telling her not to leave me that way ever again. She averted to the fact that she did not leave me. She just had gone home. I then asked her why she did not call last night and say that she'd gotten home safely. She again answered quite calmly that she wanted to make me think about my situation a little bit and get better perspective on it. I told her that she did that all right. I was half out of my mind thinking about just what we're going to do. As I completed dressing, quite relieved at how things had turned out, I asked what was on the agenda for today. Ann said that she would go to her house for breakfast and see what developed thereafter. I looked at her in puzzlement, but she ignored it and stood at the door waiting for me to finish dressing. As we drove to her house, again I sensed a different relationship between us. As we drove to her house, I again sensed a different relationship between us. It was no longer the familiar, fanciful, romantic hiatus that we both enjoyed too much. This was now a more sophisticated, mature love, not that we ever had a cursory, immature, soldier-girlfriend sort of relationship. In a word, our love had matured, nurtured by contrasting experiences and our mutual admiration for one another. The torments of last night had brought that home to me quite vividly. The desire to be intimate and one with her body had always been a factor.
What? What's going on down
I don't know,
there?
some type of commotion. I can't see with the wall.
Huh?
I can't see with the wall, but there's some type of commotion. I'll find out shortly. Okay. In a word, our love had matured, nurtured by contrasting experiences and mutual admiration for one another. The torments of last night had brought the home to me quite vividly. The desire to be intimate and one with her body had always been a factor, and not an overwhelming desire, but a factor nonetheless, and still consumed part of my fabric. But the overriding dominant stimulus was the personality itself, the driving force that was so intensely bringing us closer together. It was the essence of her entire being radiating from her with permeated my inner self, culminating in a great coherence and tone of warmth, affection, and love for every segment of her being. As we reached the house, feeling of apprehension came over me at the thought of Ann's mother and what she must be thinking. Anne anticipated my thoughts and said offhandedly her mother was working and we would have the house to ourselves. I felt relieved and began to relax, enjoy my time with Anne in an ideal setting. While she prepared breakfast, I watched her as I sat at the kitchen table. She practiced at the maneuvering of various pots and utensils. She moved about, certainly in confidence. She looked rapturous and accurately feminine in her apron with its large floral imprint on the pocket. The sound of her pumps on the wooden floor and a sight of her upper leg, explicit in the slit of her skirt, enraptured and aroused me. As we sat at the kitchen table, opposite one another, it struck me that this would be our married life together. These last few days, and nothing would interfere to distort its magnificence. After we had cleaned and straightened the kitchen, Anne took me on to the tour of the house. It was a warm, friendly home, much more opulent than I was accustomed to. With its half-moon staircase to the upper floor and its huge fireplace in the living room. The dining room was obviously for formal dining with its large display of oaken wainscoting and elaborate trim. Anne then took me up the staircase.
Claire was lost.
Huh?
Claire was lost. We were looking for Rich.
Oh, Claire was lost.
Huh?
The commotion was Claire was lost.
No.
Did you tell her she could come up here?
No, she was in her pajamas.
Who's covered up?
Claire. She can't.
She's here?
She can't come up. She's in her pajamas.
Oh.
So another day. Was she all right?
Yeah. The nurse came and got her.
Wow. And who was that other lady?
Just somebody who lives here.
Anne showed me the spare room, which is also large and adequately furnished. It also radiated a feeling of warmth and friendliness. I could now understand more of how Anne radiated her own warmth and tenderness. She was brought up in this type of environment. She then took me to the bedroom, and I could feel her hand tremble ever so slightly. The room was gracious and reflected her personality. Where was Rich?
I don't know.
It was magnificently furnished with a large four-poster bed with a huge white canopy over the top of it. Besides the bed were night tables on each side with a large stemmed lamp sitting on top of the lace doilies. On one side of the wall was a large 5-drawer chest on top of the chest with sundry items and knickknacks. Also, there were several freestanding framed pictures, one which was Anne and me she had taken a while back at the park. How many minutes?
5.
She knew I was pleased and commenced to rearrange the pictures, more as a gesture than an art of perfection. On the outside wall was a large oak desk, which looked out on a large double-sash window into the side yard below. The desk was neat and orderly, not obtrusive, but held the essentials for a studious person. The final inner wall of the house, several large shelves, which were overflowing with books and magazines. I stopped and looked at various titles. Many were familiar to me. Tolstoy, Freud, Somerset Maugham, and others. Anne watched me as I peeked at the array of books and was pleased that I took such an interest in them. I commented that this was one subject we had never discussed, the books we had read. She smiled and sat in a large chair that furnished a desk and began toying with the various objects on the desk. I walked over to her, leaned over, and kissed her, saying that I loved everything about her. She took my hand, placed it on my cheek, and said she would remember this day forever. A tear began to form at the corner of her eye, and she valiantly brushed it aside. I reached down and kissed it away. This was beyond my expectations. Since I'd conjured up the thoughts of riding around town from place to place, of course I should have known Anne would do something like this in a way I half expected it. This was more to my liking. I soon adjusted to it and enjoyed it tremendously. Anne walked over to the canopy bed, sat on the edge of it with her legs crossed, and asked how I liked her bed. I said it was great and went over and sat next to her. The next moment, we were lying both across the bed, and I was kissing her. We became more intense and passionate. By then, I was completely... As I reached down, she turned her head toward me and whispered, "I'm sorry, but I just could not go through with it." I kissed her hand and said, in another second I would have stopped, and since we were more under control than I was a bold-faced lie. She turned, rolled over on top of me, pressed her body into mine, and grasped. She once again started to move her body. We lay there for some time, not saying anything. I held her hand, and she put her head close to my shoulder. I then put my arm under her head and drew her closer to me. After a while, I got up, walked to the window with a view of the side. I thought I should remember this part of Furlough for a long time and cherish its fond memories.
2 minutes.
Who's that down there now?
I don't know.
Look.
That's the nurse.
And the lady? Don't know? A lot of commotion. Anne got up, walked over to me, put her arms around my waist, and suggested we go downstairs while she changed to something to her. I turned and kissed her, and I said I remember her room for a long time. She said she was thinking the same thoughts and how the room had taken on a distinct, different dimension. As I sat in the kitchen waiting for Anne to come upstairs, I collected my thoughts and emotions. I concluded I had touched upon the great mystery of life, a joy and pleasure of the body principle. What you accomplish with it is a direct proportion to your mental and social conditioning. It was true, as I read in several books at the different times. The environment was a great contributing factor in your social and mental outlook. But then again, I suppose, one got conditioned to the environment, no matter how pleasing or contradictory it was, and it became ultimately another contributing factor in the mix of life. Minutes?
3 seconds.
Anne walked into the kitchen, and she looked radiant in a bright red dress with a white surround collar and a wide black belt around her slender waist. I told her she looked beautiful. She thanked me and began to prepare lunch for us. I told her not to bother, that we would go somewhere, but she insisted she wanted to. She was very cordial, and I loved her every part of her.